Today I'm going to talk about 80s scene, and more specifically about the kind of alternative gothic scene that was around for teenagers at that time. I don't know if it still happens, but back in the 1980s we used to have what were called teen nights, and these were nights hosted by nightclubs who would specifically do a night for teenagers who were interested in alternative music or just wanted a night out anyway. The bars didn't serve alcohol, and it was just a nice night, and it was just about the music and dancing and meeting your friends and having a good time. So what we had here in Stoke is we had a couple of teen nights. There was a top teen club at the place. There was a night at the Highlight in Longton, which was, I think it was on a Saturday, but I'm not sure, I can't remember. Then we had, yes, the Highlight, sorry, yes. It's okay, I was just thinking about the building because they had the original night in the main building, and then they moved it to another place, another part of the building, where you had two rooms. You had a chart music room, which was full of all the chart music from the time, and an alternative room. I spent a lot of my time in the alternative room, where we would hear things like glam rock, punk, new wave, goth, alternative, new romantic, electronica, that kind of thing. So that was kind of the music that we were interested in, so it was where we did our dancing. So yes, we were opened up to quite a lot of different types of music, really. So obviously from things like, when I say glam rock, I'm not talking about the late 80s glam rock with the, you know, Faster Pussycat, Motley Crue, that kind of thing. I'm talking about the 1970s glam rock, because that was huge amongst the alternative community, certainly in our area it was. So bands that were played were T-Rex, David Bowie, The Sweet, Suzi Quatro, anything that was considered kind of glam rock back in the early 70s. So lots of tunes you could dance along to, lots of tunes that you perhaps heard when you were growing up, because obviously I was born in 1970, so it was stuff that I was hearing when I was younger. There was a particular track called The Sweet Mix that was played quite a lot, and that was kind of an amalgamation of several sweet tracks all kind of pushed together, and just really, you know, really fun to dance along to. So, and we had punk songs played, so we played the Buzzcocks, Sex Pistols, The Clash, all kinds of punk bands. Susie and the Banshees were played, The Cure, so it's a bit more goth type, plus Sisters of Mercy were played. So it was quite a broad spectrum. Again, also what was considered alternative, so obviously at the later stages you get people like the Jesus and Mary Chain, the Smiths, that kind of thing played. And the new romantic stuff, so Duran Duran, early Spandau Ballet, early Simple Minds, bands that are around in the sort of early 80s. And then obviously electronica, so you would get some Depeche Mode, you would get some New Order, some Joy Division, and all kinds of stuff. But it was all stuff that we could dance to, and it was all stuff that we loved. And it was our chance and our opportunity as teenagers to be part of the bigger community of older people. So you could say we were baby bats, but we didn't see ourselves as that. We saw ourselves as goth or alternative people. So clothing wise, there was a big emphasis on do-it-yourself back in those times. That came out of the punk thing. So, you know, wearing a leather jacket or something was part of it. I didn't have a leather jacket back then, but I had some slightly asymmetrical clothing, asymmetrical closing jackets, that sort of thing. I also had tube skirts that were just kind of a tube of like jersey material They were quite nice to wear, very comfy. And I'd wear those with oversized shirts. So there might be, if I was going for a night out to one of these teen nights, I would probably wear a satin oversized shirt that would be black satin or red satin or something that was, you know, oversized. There was, at that time, there was some ethnic clothing, ethnic type shirts that were oversized that were quite nice too, they were in a kind of rayon material but with kind of swirly paisley type patterns on. Paisley shirts, check shirts, anything like that was part of the outfit, worn with a usually raiding mum's or granny's jewellery box to get brooches that we would wear at the collar. And then maybe the crucifix if you had a crucifix, or a rosary if you had a rosary. Being from a Catholic family, I had a rosary, so I used to wear my rosary. And you'd wear a big belt too, so you could kind of puff up your shirt a bit, but they were quite long and quite baggy, so it hid a multitude of sins. And we'd wear that with either stilettos, fishnets and stilettos, or, because I liked to be comfortable, always have done, I'd wear mine with pixie boots. So I'd always have pixie boots on. So my belt would be like a studded belt or something, or it would be just a big wide belt. So that was what we considered alternative. There were at that time shops like Phase Clothing that sold stuff that was a bit more risky and a bit more edgy that some of the older people wore, but you know, being teenager, we had what we could afford, and we had what, you know, mum and dad would buy. So back in that time as well, so if you were interested in the sort of alternative Gothic subculture as it was becoming known, there was a interest in sort of religious iconography. So the Gothic architecture of cathedrals and churches with the arches and the iconography, the stained glass, are harking back to medieval times. Perhaps an over-romanticised view of what it was like in those times, but certainly, you know, an appreciation of these things. So also castles were a big thing, especially when you see pictures of German castles in the mountains, and you would, you know, just castles in general are quite Gothic, you know. So abandoned castles were, you know, ruined castles are kind of the thing. Obviously, if you were more interested in mysticism and the occult and those kinds of subjects, like I was, and certainly still am, so I was very influenced by astrology and tarot. I also liked sacred sites, I still do. I still like going to stone circles and so on. So it's not a particularly Gothic thing to do, but certainly it's something that's alternative to the mainstream. So obviously we have things like the history of art as well. So we have the Renaissance, we have the paintings of people like Hieronymus Bosch, who produced these surrealistic, very dark, inspired scenes. Pre-Raphaelitism was quite big as well, so if you had an appreciation of the Pre-Raphaelite movement with its, again, looking back to medieval style and form, that was part of it too. Again, things like flock wallpaper and candles everywhere, it was all part of it. Incense, I remember burning incense for the first time, burning a joss stick, and they were strawberry flavoured joss sticks. Spiritual Sky were the make. I'm not sure if they still make them anymore, but they did back in the 80s. And I had this strawberry incense stick, so I'm going to burn some. And my mum came bursting through the door and said, "Oh my God, you're taking drugs, you're taking drugs." And I said, "No, I'm not, I'm just burning a joss stick. Put it out, put it out, put it out. It's terrible, it's horrible." And I just thought, you really don't understand me, do you? Because obviously incense. So I think something that, certainly with the earlier goth movement, it was about feeling, it was about textures and this sensuality of it all. So yeah, of the senses, of heightening your senses. So again, it was smells. So there's an appreciation of scent. So obviously things that are musky or dark or patchouli based were quite strong. Spicy scents. I remember a particular favourite perfume of mine from that time was Opium, because it was just absolutely beautiful. But I can never afford to buy proper Christian Dior Opium, so I bought, or is it Yves Saint Laurent who did Opium? I can't remember, but it was that spicy scent, so I can never afford that. So I used to buy the cheap versions of the same perfume because I just really liked them. So again, anything that was a heavy incense base or a heavy deep floral and musk base. So, you know, you're surrounding yourself in this sense of everything. So you would waft into a room and you'd smell of whatever it was you smelt of. Also at the time, the Body Shop was becoming quite popular. So scents like dewberry and white musk and all the scents that they used to have a massive range of perfume oils, which were just adorable. They were absolutely beautiful. I've still got one somewhere which is a woody sandalwood one, which is kind of like a sandalwood and patchouli. It's a very dark, heavy scent, but it's absolutely amazing, you know. So yeah, we had this sort of scent thing. Day to day, generally speaking, most people would wear band t-shirts and jeans. Yes, it might be black jeans if you could get them. Sometimes it'd be blue jeans or stonewashed jeans, whatever. It was whatever jeans you had, and quite often wore with band t-shirts. So for example, I used to have a Susie and the Banshees t-shirt that I wore all the time till it disintegrated. It was a white t-shirt with a kind of blue and silver design on it. It was absolutely stunning and I loved it. I absolutely loved wearing it. But I also wore things like, I had a Minnie the Minx t-shirt that I wore that I quite liked. As well in those times, it was more, if you were interested in that kind of subculture, you did it more when you went out to kind of appear and tell people, look, hey, this is who I am, recognise me as being part of this subculture. And I'm somebody, as I got older, I needed to conform for various jobs and so on, so I had, quite often, for a long time I had red hair, which, you know, you may have seen in my earlier videos I had red hair, but certainly sort of from about 18 onwards I had red hair. And I had a bobbed style for quite a while because I had quite a normal job. And it was expected that I would, you know, look the part. So there was very much a toning down of who I was, but I felt it inside, and if I went out then I would make the effort. And certainly on weekends, if I wasn't in my work clothes during the day, my weekends would be band shirts, leggings, you know, Doc Martens, and that was, for years I just wore stuff like that all the time. So again, black leather jackets were in, so I remember certainly sort of in the early 90s having a black leather jacket given to me that was an original 1970s black leather jacket. So the lining was all falling apart, but I loved this jacket and I lived in it day and night. I literally wore it all the time. And I had a couple of badges on it, and I had the Rocky Horror Show on one arm, The Cure on the other, and then on the back I had 2 blue Celtic Knotworks. I was hoping to do the back panel, but I never got around to doing it. I was going to paint the back panel. I also did things like, you know, on the back of my Doc Martens, you know, you have a strip down the back of the Doc Marten where the tab is. I would paint sort of patterns on there as well, because again, it was part of being creative. It was part about embracing who you are and wearing stuff that just kind of said you belong to this subculture. So yeah, that was kind of what we did back then. Obviously everybody had different experiences. I would look from afar at all the people with the massively crimped back combed hair, I had crimpers myself, so occasionally I would crimp my hair too. If I was going out, I'd crimp it and certainly sort of stick it up. So it was all about being part of it. So those very early days kind of shaped me into who I was becoming later, into my 20s, when the 90s happened and the 90s goth scene happened. And certainly sort of in the early 90s, that was when I dyed my hair black, because I thought, no, I want to have black hair, I'm going to have it dyed black. And I went to a hairdresser who got it dyed black, and I had it layered so that I could crimp it and backcomb it and make it a wild mess. So as I said, it was kind of a bit later that I did some stuff that was a bit more certainly alternative looking. I spent a lot of time going to rock nightclubs in the 90s, but I would wear long flowing skirts. I had a dinner jacket that I wore with a satin collar. So again, it was about making things your own and just embracing it for what it is. So I'm not going to cover the 90s period here. I'll cover the 90s in another video because I think it deserves its own video. Certainly as a teenager, teen nightclubs were the thing, and obviously I'm in my later teens going to those pubs and places where all the weird people hung out. Still kind of on the periphery of it, but you know, I liked it, I appreciated the aesthetic, I was interested in so many of the things. Another thing that was big amongst certainly gothic and alternative types were horror movies. Horror movies were big in the 1980s. We had movies that came out like The Evil Dead. So many different kinds of horror movies that, because we've got the advent of VHS and video and Betamax video, we would hire out videos. At the age of 14, we were hiring out these over 18 videos and really kind of thinking, oh my God, what are we doing? We're really naughty. You know, I remember watching things like Cannibal Ferox, which was considered a snuff movie. We watched snuff movies. We watched so many different kind of movies, so many different kind of horror movies. Some of them were truly appalling. They were really bad, badly acted, badly scripted, badly directed. But you know what? They shaped who we are. So horror became very tongue-in-cheek to us. We liked to watch things and watch and read things like, you know, Stephen King and James Herbert, and, you know, horror stories, horror movies. It was where it was at, and catching some of those old horror movies on the TV because they were being repeated. So even things like the 1930s Dracula, they would put it every now and then. They would put something on late at night that was an old horror movie. It was an old black and white horror movie, or that it would be a Sherlock Holmes story or something, which again was kind of brilliant because they were so atmospheric. Yeah, you had The Lady in White, you had just so many different films. I can't even remember what I saw back then. There were so many films that were out, and some we would watch over and over and over again because we could just watch them, because video was such a new thing. Your video cassettes were such a new thing. You know, I remember at the age of about 14 not having one at home and going to my friend's house so much because she had a video player, and we would just go to the local video shop and get videos out and watch them, binge watch them, like you binge watch Netflix now or Amazon Prime or whatever the different online streaming sites are. We would binge watch videos over and over again, and we would tape TV shows that had our favourite music on, and we'd watch those over and over and over again. So we were very, very lucky that it was a very exciting time. We had TV music programmes like The Tube that would show alternative music. The Old Grey Whistle Test would be on BBC Two. Top of the Pops even had acts like The Cure, Susie and the Banshees, all those kind of acts on. So for us, it was a wonderfully exciting time. It was a melting pot of so much creativity, so much influence from the 70s musically and stylistically, that it became a big thing. And I'm so pleased that I was able to live through that time because it was so important to us. I think your teenage years are the most important, and they are what shapes you when you become an adult. So the things that you're interested in, the things that, you know, make you you are developed in your teen years, and it's important that you have a good grounding. So it wasn't about being better than anybody else. It wasn't about being more of something than anybody else. It was whatever you did was okay and was right. And that was what the beauty of the subcultures were. You could meet somebody who was totally black with spider-like hair and, you know, had all the gear on. And you would equally get people who perhaps just had a band t-shirt, but they were all into the same kinds of music, and it all mattered because what mattered was who they were and the fact that they got a commonality, they got things in common. And that was much more important than whether you had a lot of people following you around, because generally a lot of these people didn't have people following them around, you know. They were just normal people who had a job during the week, who went to school or college or university, and who just turned up at the nightclubs on the weekend to look fabulous, to dance to the music, and to be with friends and have a great time. And that was what it was about. It wasn't about how many, as I said, how many followers you've got, because that sort of thing didn't happen then, unless you were a musical star. Then of course things were different then. Obviously we have YouTube now, which is very much a different animal to how things used to be. But back in the old days, you'll hear people like me and some of the others talking about what it was like in the old days. It's what we were enthusiastic about then, and it is what makes us enthusiastic about the subculture now. The fact that it exists at all still. Something that's worth celebrating. Whoever you are, whatever you're doing, it's about the subculture and keeping that going and keeping that spark, that creativity, that essence of it going. So I'm going to leave this here. Thank you for watching. I'm sorry if I've kind of rambled and darted all over the place in this, but I hope I've kind of got my point across. Obviously, if you've got any questions, leave them down below and I will respond to them in another video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all soon. Bye.